The thunder cracked overhead as Lillian Clarkson pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the Blackwater Saloon, unaware she had just stepped into the most dangerous establishment in the Arizona Territory. The year was 1885, and a woman alone had no business entering a place where outlaws gathered to spend their ill-gotten gains. Conversation died instantly. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward the slim figure silhouetted in the doorway. Her honey-blonde hair damp from the sudden downpour, her traveling dress caked with mud at the hem. Lillian froze. The weight of those stares pressing against her like physical blows as she realized her terrible mistake. Well, well, what do we have here? A man with a jagged scar cutting across his left cheek, pushed back from a card table, whiskey sloshing in his glass. A little lost bird's flown into our cage. Lillian took an instinctive step backward, her hand fumbling for the door handle. I apologize for the intrusion. I was merely seeking shelter from the storm. Oh, you found shelter all right, the scarred man said, advancing toward her with unmistakable intent in his bloodshot eyes. And we're mighty hospitable to pretty ladies. As several men rose from their tables, leering grins spreading across their faces, a figure at the far end of the bar moved with startling speed. In 3 long strides, a tall cowboy with broad shoulders positioned himself between Lillian and the approaching threat. "The lady's with me," he said, his voice low, but carrying the unmistakable edge of steel. His right hand rested casually on his holstered Colt, but there was nothing casual about his stance. Lillian caught her breath as she looked up at her unexpected defender. The light from the oil lamps caught in his sandy brown hair and glinted off eyes the color of a summer storm. He didn't look at her, keeping his attention fixed on the scarred man who had stopped short. "Owen O'Malley," the scarred man spat. "Since when do you claim women in my establishment?" "Since right now, Curtis," Owen replied evenly. "And it's not your establishment. Last I checked, Marshall owns this place." Curtis's hand twitched near his gun. "You're outnumbered, O'Malley." "Maybe." Owen's voice remained steady. "But you'll be the first man dead if this turns ugly." The tension in the room stretched taut as a bowstring. Lillian hardly dared breathe. Then a grizzled old man behind the bar slammed down a bottle. "No gunplay in my saloon," he bellowed. "Curtis, you and your boys settle down. The lady clearly wandered in by mistake." Curtis hesitated, his eyes darting between Owen and the bartender. Finally, he gave a disgusted snort and backed away, though the hostility in his gaze didn't diminish. "Fine. But, O'Malley, you'd best watch your back and take your lady somewhere else." Owen's hand remained on his gun as he spoke quietly to Lillian. "Back out slowly. I'll be right behind you." Heart hammering, Lillian did as instructed, feeling the burning stares of the men following her every move. The cowboy backed out after her, never turning his back on the room full of outlaws until they were both outside in the pouring rain. The moment the door swung shut, he grabbed her elbow and hurried her across the muddy street toward a more respectable-looking establishment, the Silver Dollar Hotel. "What in God's name were you thinking?" he demanded once they were under the hotel's awning. "Don't you know what kind of place that is? That's the Blackwater Saloon hangout for every cutthroat and cattle rustler in 3 territories." Lillian pushed wet strands of hair from her face, embarrassment and fear making her voice shake. I only arrived in town today. The stagecoach let me off at the other end of the street, and when the storm hit, I ran for the nearest shelter. I had no idea." "You could have been killed," Owen interrupted, his expression grim. "Or worse." "Thank you," she said quietly. "You risked your life for a complete stranger?" Something in his face softened slightly. "No decent man would leave a lady to face that pack of wolves alone." He glanced back toward the saloon. "But we're not safe yet. Curtis Blackwell and his gang don't forget slights, real or imagined. Where are you staying?" "I don't know," Lillian admitted. "I came to find my uncle. He owns a ranch near here, the Lazy Sea." Owen's eyebrows shot up. "Charles Clarkson is your uncle?" "Yes. Do you know him?" "Everyone knows Charlie Clarkson." Owen frowned. "But he's not in town. Rode out to Santa Fe 2 days ago on business. Won't be back for at least a week." Lillian's shoulders slumped. "Oh." She'd come all the way from Boston after receiving her uncle's invitation, never considering he might not be there to meet her. "I suppose I'll need a room here then." Owen hesitated, looking uncertain for the first time. Miss Clarkson, Lillian Clarkson. Miss Clarkson, this hotel isn't particularly secure, and if Curtis decides to hold a grudge... A chill that had nothing to do with her damp clothes ran through Lillian. What are you suggesting, Mr. O'Malley? I have a small ranch about 3 miles outside town. My sister lives there too. It would be entirely proper. You'd be safer there until your uncle returns. Lillian studied him carefully. Everything she'd been taught warned against trusting a strange man so quickly. Yet, he'd already protected her once, and there was something in those gray eyes that spoke of honor. How do you know my uncle? She asked. I break horses for him sometimes. He's a good man. Owen glanced back toward the saloon, where shadows moved behind the grimy windows. We don't have much time to decide, Miss Clarkson. Curtis and his boys will be watching for us. The rain continued to pound the street, turning it into a river of mud. Lillian took a deep breath. Very well. Mr. O'Malley, I accept your offer. Owen nodded. Wait here. My horse is at the livery. I'll be back in 5 minutes. True to his word, he returned quickly, leading a magnificent chestnut gelding. Without ceremony, he lifted Lillian into the saddle, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her as he took the reins, and despite the impropriety of their position, Lillian felt safer than she had since stepping off the stagecoach. They rode out of town at a careful pace, the horse picking its way through the muddy streets. Once they reached the open road, Owen urged the animal into a ground-eating lope. I'm sorry about the arrangement, he said, his voice close to her ear, but it's the safest way. Lillian nodded, acutely aware of the solid wall of his chest against her back. You've been very kind, Mr. O'Malley. Owen, he corrected. If we're going to be sharing a roof, even temporarily, you might as well use my given name. Then you must call me Lillian, she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. The rain began to ease as they rode, the storm moving eastward. Moonlight broke through the clouds, illuminating a landscape utterly foreign to Lillian's eastern eyes, vast, open, and wild. In the distance, she could make out the silhouette of mountains against the night sky. It's beautiful, she murmured. You get used to it, Owen replied, but she could hear the affection in his voice. It grows on you, all this space. Is your ranch very large? He gave a short laugh. Hardly a ranch by Arizona standards, just 160 acres. But it's mine, free and clear. They crested a small rise, and Lillian saw lights twinkling in the valley below. As they drew closer, she made out a modest but well-maintained ranch house, a barn, and several corrals. A dog began barking, announcing their arrival. A young woman appeared in the doorway of the house, holding a lantern. Owen, is that you? It's me, Olivia, he called back, and I've brought a guest. He dismounted and reached up to help Lillian down. His hands at her waist were strong and sure, and for a moment when her feet touched the ground, they stood very close together. Lillian looked up into his face and felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. Thank you, she whispered. Owen cleared his throat and stepped back. Come on, Olivia will have coffee hot, and probably questions. Lots of questions. Olivia O'Malley turned out to be a pretty, dark-haired woman of about 20, with the same gray eyes as her brother, but a much more expressive face. She took in Lillian's bedraggled appearance and immediately ushered her toward the fire. You poor thing, you're soaked through. Owen, what on earth? She wandered into the black water by mistake, Owen said tersely, removing his hat and hanging it by the door. Curtis Blackwell and his boys were there. Olivia's eyes widened. Oh my goodness, are you all right, Miss Clarkson? Lillian Clarkson, Lillian supplied. And yes, thanks to your brother. He was very brave. Or very foolish, Owen muttered. But there was no heat in his words. Olivia, Miss Clarkson is Charlie Clarkson's niece. She came to stay with him, but he's gone to Santa Fe. Understanding dawned in Olivia's eyes. And you couldn't leave her in town with Curtis knowing she exists. She turned to Lillian with a warm smile. You're very welcome to stay with us, Miss Clarkson. It'll be wonderful to have another woman around the place. Please call me Lillian, she said, returning the smile. And I can't thank you both enough. Let's get you some dry clothes, Olivia said, already heading toward what Lillian presumed was a bedroom. We're about the same size, I think. and then some hot food. While Olivia helped Lillian change into a simple but clean dress, Owen saw to his horse and then built up the fire in the stone hearth. By the time the women returned, he had a pot of coffee brewing and was slicing bread. "I'll make a proper supper," Olivia announced, taking over the kitchen area. "You both must be half-starved." As they ate Olivia's hearty stew, Lillian explained about her journey from Boston and her uncle's invitation to come west. "After my parents died last winter, Uncle Charles wrote suggesting I might prefer the open spaces of Arizona to Boston society." She looked down at her bowl. "There wasn't much to keep me there anymore." "I'm sorry about your parents," Owen said quietly. Lillian nodded her thanks. "Uncle Charles said I could stay as long as I wished. I just didn't expect him to be away when I arrived." "Charlie's a good neighbor," Owen said. "One of the few big ranchers who doesn't try to push the smaller operations off their land." "Unlike the Circle B," Olivia added with a frown. "Circle B?" Lillian asked. "Blackwell Ranch," Owen explained. "Curtis Blackwell's father owns its largest spread in the territory. They've been buying up land, or, when that doesn't work, finding other ways to get what they want." "Other ways?" Owen and Olivia exchanged a look. "Let's just say accidents tend to happen to folks who refuse to sell to the Blackwells," Owen said grimly. Lillian's appetite suddenly diminished. "And you stood against Curtis Blackwell today." "It wasn't the first time," Owen said with a shrug. "We've had our differences before." After supper, Olivia showed Lillian to a small but comfortable bedroom. "It's not what you're used to, I'm sure," she apologized. "It's perfect," Lillian assured her, "and much safer than where I might have ended up." She hesitated. "Your brother, he took a great risk for me today." Olivia's expression softened. "That's Owen. He doesn't talk much about what's right, he just does it." She smiled. "Rest now. Things will look better in the morning." But when morning came, bringing with it clear skies and brilliant sunshine, it also brought trouble. Lillian was helping Olivia prepare breakfast when they heard the rapid hoofbeats of an approaching rider. Owen, who had been out since dawn checking the stock, came hurrying in from the barn. "Stay inside," he ordered, his hand already on his gun as he went back out to meet the visitor. Through the window, Lillian watched as a young cowboy reined his lathered horse to a stop in the yard. The man spoke urgently to Owen, whose expression darkened with each passing moment. After a brief conversation, the rider galloped off again, and Owen returned to the house. "That was Jimmy Torres from the Lazy C," he said, his voice tight. "There's been trouble. Someone shot up your uncle's place last night. Nobody was hurt, just the ranch hands there, but they left a message." "What kind of message?" Olivia asked. Owen's eyes met Lillian's. "A warning for Charlie to keep his eastern relatives at home." Lillian felt the blood drain from her face. "This is because of me? Because of what happened yesterday?" "Curtis must have put it together when he heard your name," Owen said grimly. "He's sending a message." "But why would he care about me at all?" Lillian asked, bewildered. Owen and Olivia exchanged another of those significant looks. Finally, Owen sighed. "Your uncle's land sits between the Circle B and the river. Blackwell has wanted that property for years, but Charlie won't sell. If Charlie has family coming to settle, it makes it less likely he ever will sell. So I'm a threat," Lillian said slowly, "just by existing." "You're not going back to town," Owen stated flatly. "Not while Curtis is riled up like this." "But I can't stay here and put you both in danger," Lillian protested. "If they shot up my uncle's ranch, what's to stop them from doing the same here?" "We've dealt with Blackwell threats before," Owen said, "and I sent word to the marshal in town. He may not be able to prove Curtis was behind it, but at least he'll be watching." For the next 3 days, Lillian remained at the O'Malley Ranch. Despite the circumstances, she found herself settling into the rhythm of ranch life with surprising ease. She helped Olivia with cooking and household tasks, and in the evenings, the three of them would sit by the fire while Owen read aloud from one of the dog-eared books on their small shelf. Lillian learned that the O'Malleys had come west after the death of their parents in Chicago 8 years earlier. Owen had worked as a ranch hand until he'd saved enough to buy their modest property. He had a way with horses that bordered on magical, Olivia told her proudly. "He can gentle the wildest bronc," she said, as they watched him working with a spirited bay in the corral. "It's how we make most of our money, Owen breaking horses that other men can't handle." Lillian couldn't help admiring the confident way Owen moved, the quiet authority in his voice as he spoke to the nervous animal. When he glanced up and caught her watching, he tipped his hat with a small smile that made her heart skip. "He likes you," Olivia remarked casually. "I'm simply a responsibility he took on," Lillian demurred, though she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her at the thought. Olivia shook her head. "My brother doesn't look at responsibilities the way he looks at you." That evening after supper, while Olivia was visiting a neighbor's daughter who had fallen ill, Owen took Lillian on a walk to see the sunset from the ridge above the ranch. The air was cooling rapidly as they reached the top, and without a word, Owen removed his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. "Thank you," she said, pulling it close and inhaling the scent of leather, horses, and something uniquely Owen. They stood in companionable silence, watching as the sun painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and reds. The vastness of the landscape still took Lillian's breath away. "It's so different from Boston," she murmured. "There, everything feels confined, buildings pressing in, society's rules hemming you in on all sides." Owen nodded. "That's why I could never live in a city again. Out here, a person can breathe." "Yes," Lillian agreed softly. "I understand that now." He turned to look at her, his expression curious. "You're not what I expected." "Oh? And what did you expect?" "A fancy Eastern lady who'd faint at the sight of dirt and complain about the lack of servants." Lillian laughed. "Well, I was raised in Boston society, but my mother came from simpler stock. She made sure I knew how to cook and clean and generally be useful." Her smile faded. "She always said worth wasn't measured by how many people served you, but by how well you served others. Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was." Lillian looked back at the sunset. She would have loved this view. They were quiet again, standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. When the sun finally dipped below the horizon, Owen sighed. "We should head back before it gets too dark." As they walked down the trail, his hand occasionally brushed against hers, sending little sparks of awareness up Lillian's arm. By the time they reached the ranch yard, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Lillian paused by the porch steps, turning to face Owen. "Thank you for showing me the sunset, and for everything else." She began to remove his jacket. "Keep it for now," he said, his voice husky in the gathering darkness. The night's turning cold. Their eyes held for a long moment, and Lillian felt herself swaying slightly toward him. Owen's gaze dropped to her lips, and she was certain he was going to kiss her. Instead, he took a deliberate step back. "Olivia should be home soon," he said, his voice controlled. "I'll check on the horses before turning in." Lillian nodded, ignoring the pang of disappointment. "Good night, Owen." "Good night, Lillian." She watched him stride toward the barn, his shoulders stiff under his cotton shirt. Only when he disappeared inside did she turn to enter the house, wondering what might have happened if Olivia's imminent return hadn't been on his mind. The next morning, Lillian was kneading bread dough when the sound of multiple horses approaching set her nerves on edge. Owen, who had been mending tack at the kitchen table, was on his feet instantly, gun drawn, as he moved to the window. "Stay back," he warned, peering outside. His body tensed. "Damn, it's Curtis Blackwell and 4 of his men." Fear clutched at Lillian's throat. "What do they want?" "Nothing good." Owen checked his revolver. "Stay inside, no matter what happens." "Owen!" "Promise me, Lillian?" His gray eyes bored into hers with fierce intensity. "I promise," she whispered. With a curt nod, he strode outside to meet the riders, closing the door firmly behind him. Lillian hurried to the window, heart pounding as she watched Owen stand on the porch, his stance casual but alert. Curtis Blackwell was easy to identify, a stocky man with that vicious scar slashing across his face. He sat astride a large black horse, a cruel smile playing on his lips as he regarded Owen. "O'Malley," he called. "Fine morning for a visit, isn't it?" "State your business." "Blackwell," Owen replied evenly. Curtis made a show of looking around the property. "Nice little place you've got. Shame if anything happened to it." His cold eyes fixed on Owen again. "We're looking for Charlie Clarkson's niece. Word is, you've been hiding her here. And if I have, then you're sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Again." Curtis leaned forward in his saddle. That woman's presence here is causing problems. Charlie needs to understand that bringing in family changes things. You shot up an innocent man's property to make a point, Owen said, disgust evident in his voice. Real brave. One of the riders with Curtis, a thin man with a pockmarked face, spat on the ground. Watch your mouth, O'Malley. There's 5 of us and 1 of you. Which makes the odds about even, Owen replied, his hand resting near his holster. Curtis laughed, though there was no humor in it. Always the hero, aren't you? Well, here's how this is going to play out. The Clarkson woman goes back east, or there will be consequences. For her uncle, and for anyone foolish enough to protect her. Is that a threat, Curtis? It's a guarantee. Curtis surveyed the ranch again, his gaze lingering on the barn and corrals. Be a shame if your horses got spooked one night. Fire can spread so quickly in a dry season. Lillian's hands clenched into fists, fury rising in her at the casual threat against people who had shown her nothing but kindness. She wanted to rush outside, to tell Curtis Blackwell she wasn't afraid of him, but she had promised Owen she would stay inside. I think you'd better leave, Owen said, his voice dangerously calm. Now. Curtis smiled again, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. Just passing along a friendly warning, for now. He wheeled his horse around. You've got 2 days to get her on a stage heading east. After that, well... He let the implication hang in the air as he and his men rode off in a cloud of dust. Only when they were well away did Owen lower his hand from his gun and come back inside. His face was grim. You heard? He asked. Lillian nodded. Every word. She straightened her shoulders. I should go. I won't have you and Olivia threatened because of me. No. Owen's response was immediate and firm. Running is exactly what they want. Besides, there's no guarantee they'd leave you alone on the journey east. Curtis isn't known for keeping his word. Then what do we do? Owen paced the small kitchen. We need help. Legal help, ideally. But Marshal Wilson is in Blackwell's pocket. He stopped suddenly. There's a federal marshal passing through Tucson. Jimmy mentioned it yesterday. He's investigating land fraud cases. If we could get word to him? How? Wouldn't Curtis's men be watching the trails to town? Probably. Owen's expression turned thoughtful. But not all of them. There's an old Apache trail that cuts through the canyon. It's dangerous, but it would get us to Tucson faster than the main road. Us? Lillian raised an eyebrow. You're not suggesting I come with you. I'm not leaving you here unprotected. His face softened slightly. Besides, you're a witness to Curtis's threats. The marshal will want to hear directly from you. Lillian took a deep breath. When do we leave? Tonight, after dark. Owen glanced out the window. We'll need to move fast and travel light. He looked back at her, concern evident in his eyes. It won't be an easy journey. I'm stronger than I look, Mr. O'Malley, she said, lifting her chin. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I'm beginning to see that, Miss Clarkson. When Olivia returned from her visit, Owen explained the situation. She immediately began packing provisions for their journey. I'll be fine here, she assured them. The Tauruses will check on me, and Curtis isn't likely to bother a woman alone. It's not his style. He prefers intimidating men. As dusk approached, Owen saddled 2 horses, his chestnut gelding, and a steady mare for Lillian. They packed only what was necessary: food, water, bedrolls, and weapons. Owen made sure Lillian knew how to handle the small revolver he gave her, though he hoped she wouldn't need to use it. Keep it hidden, but accessible, he instructed, and don't hesitate if you have to shoot. In this country, hesitation can get you killed. The gravity of his words sank in, making the danger they faced suddenly more real. Yet strangely, Lillian wasn't afraid, at least, not for herself. Her fear was for Owen, who was risking everything to help her. As full darkness fell, they said their goodbyes to Olivia and mounted up. Owen led them away from the ranch, not by the main trail, but across open country, keeping to the shadows where possible. For nearly an hour they rode in silence, the only sounds the soft thud of hooves on packed earth and the occasional night bird's call. When they reached the entrance to a narrow canyon, Owen pulled up, listening intently before proceeding. The trail gets tricky from here, he warned in a low voice. Stay close, and let your horse find its footing. These animals know their way better than we do in the dark. The canyon walls rose high on either side, blocking out most of the starlight. The path narrowed until they had to ride single file, picking their way carefully over loose rocks and around sharp turns. Lillian concentrated on following Owen's lead, trusting both him and her sure-footed mare. They had been traveling through the canyon for perhaps 2 hours when Owen suddenly raised his hand, signaling a halt. He sat perfectly still, head cocked as if listening. "What is it?" Lillian whispered. "Riders," he murmured back. "Behind us." Lillian strained to hear, and after a moment, caught the faint sound of horses moving over rocky ground. Could it be anyone else? Possibly, but we can't take that chance. Owen glanced around quickly. "There's a side canyon about 100 yards ahead. We can hide there until they pass." They urged their horses forward at a quicker pace, the animals sensing their riders' tension. The side canyon was little more than a crack in the rock wall, but it was deep enough to conceal them and their mounts if they pressed back far enough. Owen dismounted and helped Lillian down, then led both horses deep into the crevice. They stood close together in the darkness, barely breathing as the sounds of approaching riders grew louder. "If they find us," Owen whispered, his mouth close to her ear, "run deeper into the canyon. Don't look back, just run." "I won't leave you," Lillian protested softly. His hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing gently. "Then, we'd both better hope they ride on by." The riders Lillian counted at least 3 by the sound of the hoofbeats slowed as they approached the spot where the side canyon branched off. Low voices carried to them, though the words were indistinct. "Spread out!" A voice that sounded like Curtis Blackwell's ordered. "They can't have gotten far." Owen's grip on Lillian's hand tightened. His other hand rested on his gun. The horses, sensing danger, shifted restlessly, and Owen quickly reached to steady them, placing a calming hand on each animal's nose. Long minutes passed as they listened to the searchers moving around the main canyon. Once, a rider came so close to their hiding place that Lillian could hear the creak of his saddle leather. She held her breath, pressing against Owen's side, drawing strength from his solid presence. Finally, the voices grew more distant. "Nothing here," someone called. "Let's try further up the canyon." The sound of hoofbeats faded as the riders moved away. Still, Owen held them in place for a full 10 minutes more before he whispered, "They're gone. But they know we've taken this route." "What do we do?" "Change plans." Owen led the horses carefully back to the main canyon. "We can't continue this way. They'll be watching for us further along. There's another trail that splits off about a mile back. It's even rougher, but it will take us to Tucson eventually." They backtracked cautiously, Owen constantly alert for any sound of the returning searchers. When they reached the fork he had mentioned, he hesitated. "This trail isn't used much anymore," he admitted. "It's dangerous in places." "More dangerous than being caught by Curtis Blackwell?" Lillian asked. Owen's teeth flashed white in the darkness as he smiled grimly. "Fair point." The new trail proved to be exactly as difficult as Owen had warned. It climbed steeply, winding up the canyon wall, so narrow in places that their legs brushed against the rock face. More than once, Lillian found herself holding her breath as her mare carefully picked her way along sections where the path seemed to disappear altogether. By the time they reached the canyon rim, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten. Owen found a sheltered spot among some boulders where they could rest and water the horses. "We'll stay here through the day," he decided, surveying the rugged landscape. "Too easy to be spotted moving across open country in daylight. We'll travel again tonight." They settled in their rocky shelter, sharing jerky and hardtack from their provisions. Exhaustion washed over Lillian now that the immediate danger had passed. She hadn't slept properly since Curtis's visit to the ranch, and the night's tense journey had drained what little energy she had left. Owen noticed her flagging spirits. "Rest," he said gently. "I'll keep watch." "You need sleep too," she protested. "I'll wake you in a few hours to take your turn," he promised, though they both knew he probably wouldn't. Lillian was too tired to argue. She spread her bedroll in the shade of a large boulder and lay down. Despite the hard ground and her lingering anxiety, she fell asleep almost instantly. She woke to the touch of Owen's hand on her shoulder. The sun was high in the sky, and the heat was intense despite their shady spot. "Sorry to wake you," he said, "but we need to move. Riders coming from the east don't know if they're Blackwell's men, but we can't risk it." Quickly they packed up their few belongings and saddled the horses. Owen led them on a route that kept to the rocky ridges, where they would leave minimal tracks. The going was slow and treacherous, but they saw no more sign of pursuit as the afternoon wore on. By dusk, they had reached a small stream where they could refill their water containers and let the horses drink. While the animals grazed on the sparse vegetation, Owen and Lillian sat side by side on a fallen log, sharing the last of their jerky. "We should reach Tucson by tomorrow evening if we keep up this pace," Owen said, studying the fading light in the western sky. Lillian nodded, too weary for words. Every muscle in her body ached from the long hours in the saddle over difficult terrain. She had pushed herself hard to keep up, determined not to be a burden, but exhaustion was taking its toll. Owen looked at her with concern. "You're done in," he observed. "We'll rest longer tonight." "No," she protested. "We need to keep moving. I'm fine." "Lillian?" Something in his voice made her meet his gaze. "You've been braver than most men I know would be in your situation. But even the strongest have limits." The unexpected praise brought a flush to her cheeks. "I'm not brave. I'm simply trying not to get us both killed because of my uncle's land." Owen shook his head. "It's not just about the land. Curtis Blackwell's had it in for your uncle for years, and for me, even longer." "Why you?" A shadow crossed Owen's face. 3 years ago, Curtis's brother tried to force himself on a young woman in town, a friend of Olivia's. I stopped him. It got physical. He touched a small scar near his hairline. I came away with this. He came away with a broken jaw and wounded pride. "And Curtis never forgave you," Lillian guessed. "The Blackwells don't forget slights, especially public ones." Owen's mouth set in a grim line. "Curtis would have come after me eventually, even without your situation giving him the excuse. I'm sorry I've brought this trouble to your door." "Don't be." His hand covered hers where it rested on the log between them. "Some things are worth fighting for." Their eyes met, and in that moment, Lillian knew he wasn't just talking about standing up to bullies like the Blackwells. Something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since that first day in the saloon. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Owen leaned toward her. His lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it might have been the touch of a butterfly's wing. He drew back slightly, searching her face, and what he saw there must have reassured him, for he kissed her again, more firmly this time. Lillian had been kissed before chase pecks from approved suitors in Boston drawing rooms. Nothing had prepared her for the warmth that spread through her at Owen's touch, or the way her heart seemed to expand in her chest until she could scarcely breathe. When they finally parted, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I shouldn't have done that," he murmured. "Why not?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because you're Charlie Clarkson's niece, and I'm just a small-time rancher with more enemies than assets." Lillian pulled back to look him in the eye. "Is that what you think matters to me? Social position? Money?" "It should," he said bluntly. "A woman like you deserves security, comfort. A woman like me," she interrupted, "deserves to make her own choices about what and who will make her happy." Her hand came up to touch his cheek. "And right now, Owen O'Malley, you make me very happy indeed." The smile that spread across his face transformed him, erasing the lines of worry and fatigue. He captured her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "We should try to get some sleep," he said reluctantly. "We've still got a long ride ahead of us." They made their camp by the stream, spreading their bedrolls within arm's reach of each other. Despite their fatigue, neither fell asleep immediately. They lay looking up at the star-filled sky, talking in low voices about their lives, their hopes, finding connections neither had expected. Lillian told him about growing up in Boston society, feeling always slightly out of place among the rigid social hierarchies. Owen spoke of his dreams for his small ranch, the breeding program he hoped to establish with quality horses. "My father was a horse trader in Chicago," he explained, "taught me everything I know about horseflesh. Before he died, he always said someday we'd have our own place out west, where we could raise the finest horses in the territory." "He would be proud of what you've accomplished," Lillian said softly. "Maybe." "It's a modest start. But it's yours. You built it with your own hands, your own sweat." She turned her head to look at him in the starlight. "That's something to be proud of." Owen's hand found hers in the darkness between their bedrolls. "Thank you," he said simply. They fell asleep that way, hands linked under a canopy of stars. The next morning dawned clear and hot. They set out at first light, pushing the horses as much as they dared over the rough terrain. By midday they had reached more level ground, and Owen allowed them to increase their pace. "We should reach Tucson by nightfall," he said, studying the horizon. "With any luck, we'll find the federal marshal still in town." Luck, however, wasn't with them. As they crested a rise overlooking a broad valley, Owen reined in sharply. Below them, clearly visible against the dusty landscape, 4 riders were approaching from the direction of Tucson. "Blackwell's men," Owen said grimly, recognizing the lead rider's black horse. "They must have split up to cover all the possible routes." Lillian's heart sank. How did they get ahead of us? They know this country as well as I do. Owen scanned their surroundings, looking for options. "We can't outrun them on this open ground." "Then what do we do?" Owen pointed to a rocky outcropping about half a mile to their right. "Make for those rocks. They'll give us some cover." They urged their tired horses into a gallop across the valley floor. Behind them, shouts indicated that they had been spotted. The thunder of pursuing hooves drove them on, but Lillian could tell their mounts were flagging after the difficult journey. They reached the rocks just as the first shots rang out. Owen practically dragged Lillian from her saddle, pushing her behind a large boulder as bullets pinged off the stone around them. "Stay down," he ordered, drawing his revolver. He fired 2 careful shots toward their pursuers, forcing them to seek cover. For several tense minutes, gunfire was exchanged. Owen was a good shot, but they were outnumbered, and their position, while offering protection, also left them trapped. "They're trying to circle around behind us," Owen muttered, counting his remaining bullets. "We can't stay here." Lillian peered over the boulder. "There's a deeper ravine about 50 yards to our left. If we could reach it—" "Too exposed," Owen shook his head. "They'd cut us down before we got halfway there. Unless one of us creates a diversion." Lillian met his gaze steadily. "I could draw their fire while you—" "Absolutely not," he cut her off. "I didn't bring you all this way to watch you get shot." "Then what's your plan?" she demanded. "Because we can't just sit here waiting for them to surround us." Owen was silent for a moment, his expression grim. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "Listen," he said. At first, Lillian heard nothing but the occasional crack of gunfire. Then she caught it, the distant sound of multiple horses approaching, fast from the direction of Tucson. "Riders," she breathed. "More of Blackwell's men?" "I don't think so." Owen risked a glance over the boulder. "Look." In the distance, a cloud of dust marked the approach of at least a dozen riders. As they drew closer, Lillian could make out the glint of sunlight on metal stars pinned to several chests. "The law?" she whispered in disbelief. Apparently, Curtis's men had spotted the newcomers, too. The gunfire ceased, and Lillian heard the sounds of men scrambling to reach their horses. "They're running," Owen said, with grim satisfaction. He stood up cautiously, keeping his gun ready. "But I don't think they'll get far." He was right. The approaching lawmen split into 2 groups, one continuing toward Owen and Lillian's position, the other giving chase to the fleeing outlaws. Within minutes, shots rang out across the valley, and Lillian saw 2 of Curtis's men fall from their saddles. The remaining lawmen reached their position, 6 riders led by a tall, lean man with a weathered face and a silver star on his vest. He reined in his horse, regarding Owen and Lillian with sharp eyes. "You 2 all right?" he called. Owen nodded, lowering his weapon. "Thanks to your timely arrival. Are you the federal marshal?" The man dismounted, approaching with a careful stride. "Marshal Daniel Harker. And you would be?" "Owen O'Malley. This is Miss Lillian Clarkson. We were actually on our way to find you in Tucson." Harker's eyebrows rose. "Is that so? Well, you found me. Or, rather, I found you." He glanced at the retreating dust cloud where his deputies were pursuing the remaining outlaws. "Those men have been on our watch list for some time. Part of the Blackwell gang, I take it?" "Yes, sir," Owen confirmed. "Curtis Blackwell and his men, they've been terrorizing ranchers in these parts for years, but they've escalated recently." Lillian stepped forward. "They shot up my uncle's ranch, Charles Clarkson, and threatened to burn down the O'Malley's place if I didn't leave the territory." Harker's expression hardened. "Land disputes?" "My uncle owns property that borders the Blackwell Ranch," Lillian explained. They've wanted it for years, but he won't sell. When I arrived from Boston to stay with him, Curtis seemed to take it as a sign that my uncle was planning to keep the land in the family permanently. We've been tracking similar cases across 3 territories, Harker said. The Blackwells aren't the only ones using intimidation to expand their holdings, but they're among the worst. He turned to one of his deputies. Johnson, escort these folks back to Tucson. I want their full statements. The rest of you, with me. As Harker and his men rode off to join the pursuit, Deputy Johnson helped Lillian and Owen retrieve their horses. The animals were tired but unhurt, and after a brief rest and water, they were ready to continue. The ride to Tucson was uneventful, though Lillian found herself constantly scanning the horizon, half expecting more of Blackwell's men to appear. It was nearly sunset when they reached the town larger and more developed than the small settlement where she had first met Owen. Johnson took them directly to the marshal's office, where they gave detailed statements about Curtis's threats and the attack on her uncle's property. By the time they finished, night had fallen, and Harker had returned with his men and 3 prisoners, including Curtis Blackwell himself. The outlaw's face was bruised, and his hands were manacled in front of him. His eyes burned with hatred as they fell on Owen and Lillian. "This isn't over, O'Malley," he spat. "Not by a long shot." "I think it is." "Blackwell," Marshal Harker said coldly, "we've got witnesses to attempted murder, assault, and land fraud. You'll be lucky if you see daylight again before you're an old man." Curtis was led away to the cells in the back of the building, still hurling threats. Harker turned to Lillian and Owen with a tired smile. "You two look done in. There's a decent hotel down the street. Get some rest. I'll need you back here in the morning to sign your statements, but after that, you'll be free to go." "Thank you, Marshal," Owen said, shaking the man's hand. "For everything." Outside, the night air was cool on Lillian's face after the stuffiness of the marshal's office. She felt light-headed with relief and fatigue, hardly able to believe the danger had passed so suddenly. Owen must have sensed her unsteadiness, for his arm came around her waist, supporting her as they walked toward the hotel. "Almost there," he murmured, "just a little further." The hotel was indeed decent, a far cry from Boston's finest establishments, but clean and welcoming. The clerk raised an eyebrow at their trail-worn appearance, but assigned them adjoining rooms without comment, when Owen explained they had just come from the marshal's office. Outside Lillian's door, Owen hesitated. "Will you be all right? I could sit with you for a while if you're still shaken." Lillian smiled at his concern. "I'm fine, just tired." She reached up to touch his cheek. "Thank you, Owen, for everything." He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm, just as he had done by the stream. "Rest well, Lillian. I'll see you in the morning." Despite her exhaustion, Lillian lay awake for some time, after washing away the dust of their journey and changing into the clean nightgown the hotel provided. Her mind kept replaying the events of the past days, the danger, the fear, but also the growing connection she felt with the quiet cowboy who had risked everything to protect her. When she finally slept, her dreams were peaceful. The following morning, they returned to the marshal's office to sign their statements. Harker informed them that a telegraph had been sent to Charles Clarkson in Santa Fe, informing him of the situation and requesting his return. "Your uncle should be back within the week, Miss Clarkson," he said. "In the meantime, Curtis Blackwell and his men won't be troubling anyone. We've rounded up most of his gang, and his father is under investigation as well." "What happens now?" Lillian asked. "Justice," Harker replied simply. "It's been a long time coming in these parts." Outside, in the bright morning sunlight, Lillian and Owen stood facing each other on the boardwalk. Around them, Tucson went about its business wagons rolling by, shopkeepers opening their doors, the normal rhythm of a frontier town untouched by their personal drama. "I suppose we should head back," Owen said, though he made no move toward the livery where their horses were stabled. "Your uncle will want to find you safe at his ranch when he returns." Lillian nodded, a strange reluctance weighing on her. The journey was over, the danger past. There was no longer any reason for her to remain in Owen's company. The thought left her feeling oddly bereft. "Yes, I suppose we should," she agreed. Neither moved. Finally, Owen cleared his throat. "Lillian, Would you like to get some breakfast first?" she interrupted, not ready for goodbyes. "I'm famished, and I believe there's a cafe just down the street." Relief washed over his face. I would like that very much. The cafe was small but clean, with checked tablecloths and windows that let in the morning light. Over plates of eggs, bacon, and biscuits, they talked easily, avoiding the subject of parting for as long as possible. "What will you do now?" Lillian asked eventually. "Return to your ranch?" Owen nodded. "There's always work waiting, horses to train, fences to mend." He hesitated. "And you? Will you stay with your uncle or return to Boston?" She shook her head. "There's nothing for me there anymore. Uncle Charles invited me to make Arizona my home, and I think I'd like to accept that offer." She met his gaze steadily. "I've found I quite like the West, despite my rather dramatic introduction to it." A smile tugged at Owen's lips. "It does grow on you." "Yes, it does." She took a deep breath. "As do some of its inhabitants." The smile spread across his face, reaching his eyes. "Is that so, Miss Clarkson?" "It is, Mr. O'Malley." She returned his smile, feeling a blush warm her cheeks. "In fact, I find myself quite attached to certain aspects of frontier life." Owen reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "I'm very glad to hear that, because I find myself quite attached to certain Boston ladies who wander into the wrong bars." Lillian turned her hand to lace her fingers with his. Perhaps it wasn't the wrong bar after all. Perhaps it was exactly where I was meant to be. The ride back to Clarkson Ranch was leisurely compared to their frantic journey to Tucson. With the threat from Curtis Blackwell neutralized, they could take their time, enjoying the vast landscapes and each other's company. They arrived at the ranch on the third day to find the damage from the shooting already being repaired. Jimmy Torres and the other ranch hands greeted them with relief, having heard about the Blackwell gang's arrest via telegraph. "Mr. Clarkson should be back tomorrow or the next day, miss," Jimmy informed Lillian. "We got word he left Santa Fe as soon as he heard what happened." Owen helped Lillian settle into the main house, then prepared to return to his own ranch. Standing by his horse in the yard, he seemed reluctant to leave. "Olivia will be worried," he said. "I should get back." Lillian nodded, though her heart ached at the thought of his departure. "Of course. Please give her my best wishes, and tell her I'll visit soon." "I will." He hesitated, then took her hands in his. "Lillian, I know this has all happened very quickly, and you might need time to—" She rose on tiptoes and pressed her lips to his, effectively silencing whatever doubts he was about to express. When she pulled back, his eyes were wide with surprise and pleasure. "I don't need time, Owen," she said softly. "I know what I want." His arms came around her, drawing her close. "And what is that, Miss Clarkson?" "You, Mr. O'Malley?" She smiled up at him. "Just you." He kissed her then, properly a kiss that promised a future together, filled with challenges perhaps, but also with joy and partnership. "I'll come back tomorrow," he promised when they finally parted, "to speak with your uncle." Lillian's eyes widened. "Owen O'Malley? Are you planning to ask for my hand?" He grinned, looking suddenly boyish despite the trail dust and stubble. "I believe I am, madam, if that suits you." "It suits me very well indeed, sir." She straightened his collar. "But my uncle is a reasonable man. I doubt he'll object to the match." "Even though I'm just a small rancher?" "You're the man who saved his niece's life," she corrected. "Besides, Uncle Charles has never put much stock in wealth or social position. He values character above all." Owen mounted his horse, looking down at her with such tenderness it made her heart swell. "Until tomorrow?" Then, "Until tomorrow," she echoed. Lillian watched him ride away, her heart lighter than it had been in months, perhaps years. She had come west seeking a fresh start, never imagining she would find love in the process, and certainly not in such dramatic circumstances. Charles Clarkson arrived home the following afternoon, dusty and tired from his hasty journey from Santa Fe, but overjoyed to find his niece safe. He listened gravely to her account of the Blackwells' threats and Owen's protection. "This young man sounds like quite the hero," he remarked when she had finished her tale. "He is," Lillian agreed, unable to keep the warmth from her voice. "In fact, he's coming to speak with you today." Her uncle's bushy eyebrows rose. "Is he now? And would this conversation have anything to do with your future by any chance?" Lillian blushed. "It might." Charles chuckled. Well, You've been in Arizona for barely 2 weeks, and already you've found yourself a cowboy. Not just any cowboy, uncle, a good man, the best of men. Her uncle's expression softened. If he's won your heart so thoroughly, my dear, I look forward to meeting him. Owen arrived promptly at 4 o'clock, freshly shaved and wearing his best shirt. Lillian's heart swelled with pride and affection as she watched him dismount and approach the house, hat in hand. The meeting between the two men went exactly as Lillian had hoped. Her uncle, a good judge of character, seemed impressed by Owen's straightforward manner and quiet dignity. When Owen formally asked permission to court Lillian, Charles gave his blessing without hesitation. Life out here isn't easy, he cautioned them, especially for a couple just starting out. But if you're determined and work together, you can build something fine. We will, sir, Owen promised, his hand finding Lillian's. I may not have much to offer in terms of wealth, but I swear I'll do everything in my power to make her happy. Charles looked between them, a knowing smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. I believe you will, son. I believe you will. The courtship that followed was brief by Eastern standards, but neither Owen nor Lillian saw any reason to wait. They had already faced danger together and discovered the strength of their feelings under the most trying circumstances. What more could a formal courtship reveal? They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in town. With Charles giving away the bride and Olivia serving as maid of honor, the entire community turned out for the celebration that followed, held at the Clarkson Ranch under a canopy of stars. As the newlyweds danced their first dance as the husband and wife, Lillian looked up into Owen's face and saw reflected there all the love and promise she felt in her own heart. Happy? He asked softly. More than I ever thought possible, she replied. And to think it all started because I wandered into the wrong bar. Owen chuckled, pulling her closer as they swayed to the music. I'd say you wandered into exactly the right bar, Mrs. O'Malley. Exactly the right bar. In the years that followed, the O'Malley's ranch prospered. With a wedding gift from Charles Clarkson, an additional parcel of land adjoining Owen's property, and several fine breeding horses, they were able to expand their operation significantly. Owen's dream of raising the finest horses in the territory became a reality, as the O'Malley brand gained recognition for quality. Lillian, meanwhile, discovered an unexpected talent for ranch management, keeping the books with the same precision she had once applied to managing her parents' Boston household. 2 years after their marriage, their first child was born, a son they named Charles, after Lillian's uncle. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 18 months later. The children grew strong in the clean desert air, learning to ride almost before they could walk, their lives rich with the freedom and challenges of the frontier. Curtis Blackwell and his father both died in prison, their empire dismantled by the federal investigations that Marshal Harker had set in motion. The once feared Blackwell name became a cautionary tale told around campfires, a reminder that even in the wild spaces of the West, justice could prevail. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Lillian with a trip to San Francisco, her first visit to a major city since leaving Boston. They attended the opera, dined in fine restaurants, and walked arm in arm along the waterfront. But by the end of the week, they were both eager to return home. As their train crossed back into Arizona territory, Lillian rested her head on Owen's shoulder, watching the familiar landscape unfold outside the window. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Giving up Boston society for a dusty ranch and a simple cowboy? Lillian smiled, thinking of their thriving ranch, their beautiful children, the community they had helped to build. Not for a single moment, she replied honestly. The day I wandered into that saloon was the luckiest day of my life. Owen's arm tightened around her shoulders. Mine too, Lily. Mine too. As the train carried them home, Lillian reflected on the strange turns life could take. She had come west seeking a new beginning after losing her parents, never dreaming she would find not just a home, but a love story worthy of the dime novels she had secretly enjoyed as a girl. It hadn't been easy. The West demanded hard work, courage, and resilience. There had been droughts and floods, bad years when the horses didn't sell, and good years when buyers came from as far as California. Through it all, she and Owen had faced each challenge together, their bond growing stronger with each passing season. Back at the ranch, their children ran to meet them, faces alight with excitement. Behind them, The setting sun painted the mountains in shades of purple and gold, a backdrop more magnificent than any artist could capture. This was her life now, so different from what she had once imagined, yet more fulfilling than she could have dreamed. And it had all begun because she had wandered into the wrong bar, and a cowboy had shielded her until danger passed. Or perhaps, Lillian thought, as Owen swept their daughter up onto his shoulders, it had been the right bar after all.